Shidduchim podcast.
Okay, we're back with another episode of Nobody Talks Shidduchim. Today's episode is going to be how to become the person someone else wants to marry. This is something that many of us single people have been thinking about and pondering for many years. Some of us may not have had the ideal images of what a marriage looks like in their background, from whether they be their family or have been told certain things by their rabbanim or rabeim or teachers or colleges that may not exactly fit with the type of marriage that you want to see yourself in. So we have a few people on this episode, experts. IJ, actually you're not one of the people, but he's just my friend.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you are? Okay. We have Avi Singer joining us. He's a local married person in our community, and he is well known for his takes on the ideal healthy marriage. And we're looking forward to having a genuinely interesting, thought-provoking, and hopefully helpful conversation with him.
Pontificating discussion.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll be back right after these short messages.
This episode is brought to you by the Inspire Collection by Kalia. Just because you're working out doesn't mean you shouldn't look fabulous. The Inspire Collection by Kalia was designed with both style and performance in mind. It looks good, feels good, and stays put no matter how you move. And the collection has everything you need for a day at the gym. A support bra, crop tanks, bike shorts, amazing leggings, and more. It's their most versatile collection yet. Shop the Inspire Collection by Kalia now, exclusively at Dick's Sporting Goods.
Okay, so we were discussing a little bit.
Avery, tell them what episode it is.
What?
Tell them what episode it is.
We just discussed that in the break.
We're back from 56.
Okay, yeah. So we're back from 56. We were just discussing with Avi a little bit before the show certain things about the frum marriage and why it may be so difficult for people in the community to, have a healthy marriage. And we're just curious to get your take on what an ideal marriage should look like and how to become that person to start.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, always dangerous in your local community to talk about ideal marriage because people see me, right? They might see me yelling at my wife in a parking lot someplace. And be like, right? So no, that's not going to happen. But somebody once asked me if I could do a class on parenting. And I was like, absolutely not. Again, in the community, because there's no question about it. The following week, I'd be like yelling at my kid in the supermarket, and somebody like, yeah, right, that's the expert. But just to give you a little context on how I got here, and my thoughts on how I sort of came up with this concept of what is an ideal, not even so much an ideal marriage, but how does somebody become ideally prepared to be married, be part of a couple. So I went to school for organizational psychology, which is business psychology. And interestingly enough, when I was there, one of my professors said, if you want to be really good at, org psych, industrial, industrial organizational psychology, go and become a marriage and family therapist. Because sometimes working in an organization and talking to people is like talking to couples or talking to families.
Yes.
Right? Right, you're sitting in a meeting.
Totally relatable.
I didn't realize that at the time, but I went to Hofstra University for their marriage and family therapy program, and it was amazing. I learned a ton, and it was an amazing couples counseling program as well. So I decided, let me go be a couples counselor, and I started working in this community, in our community, which again is sometimes a little bit awkward, but I started working in this community as a marriage and family therapist, and I was young. I was like 25 years old. So some of the couples I would get were often either couples who were dating. Couples who were engaged or couples who were recently married, and people felt like, okay, you could relate to them, right? And over time, I started realizing some of the common themes or some of the common challenges that couples were having. I had the opportunity to speak with other local therapists, and we realized there was a real need for some premarital counseling, right? And we started writing a program. We started writing a premarital program, and the program was really focused on preparing people for marriage. And what I mean specifically about that was we felt like couples weren't prepared to pull someone else into their lives, right? They would go out because they were super compatible, right? It's like, you have this background, that background, this interest, all those things. But the most important thing, which is how do I let someone else into my life, into my world, that wasn't really being worked on. Like that wasn't really happening. And we felt like that was a huge challenge. We started writing this program. So that's really how I sort of got into this mindset of thinking about, how does somebody become ideally prepared to be married or to be part of a couple?
Avi, I like what you mentioned there, that there's 100% relatability from industrial psychology, or rather the workspace, to your home. And I'm a proponent of this. Avery knows this because we have a friendship, but we also have a business partnership. And that's how I look at it. I look at it, a marriage, and again, this is to help people like prepare, just to say, I know I can do it. I know I can do it, because I think most singles are afraid of this. And they can now think, obviously, after we have this discussion, they'll be better prepared. And when you're in that workplace and you're a certain way of being professional, you have clients, you have to deal with people, you have to sometimes bite the bullet. This really prepares you when you're living in a house with a wife. And even then, it could help you with regular roommates itself. I see it as a challenge because not everyone is in a healthy work environment today. Do you see that affecting it at large, or do you see this as something that does hold people back?
Yeah, I mean, in the corporate world, we call it worldview, right? So if I can't accept your worldview, and your worldview is basically where do you come from, right? Yeah. And aside from just being able to relate to somebody in a workplace and be able to connect with them, you really have to accept, like, where do they come from, right? Like, what's their background? What's their ethnicity, right? Where do they grow up, right? And once you can sort of understand that, and like I said, sort of pull that into your world and say, okay, now I understand where you're coming from. Why do you have a certain sensitivity around some things at work, or some things we're trying to do, or some things we're trying to accomplish, right? Now I can sort of work together with you, right? That's what worldview is. I wouldn't call it worldview necessarily in a marriage, but it's a similar concept. Right? It's a similar concept where, think about it, right? When you start dating, right? So you're coming with, 21, 22, 23 years of experience, right? where you grew up, your family, your extended family, the schools you went to, the friends you have, the camps you went to, the rabeim or teachers or whoever it is, right? You come with that worldview. And it certainly formulates your thoughts and opinions about a lot of things, right? And that person you're dating, right? It's the same exact thing, right?
Also, right.
So that's something that I think you have to be aware of, and I never hear anyone saying that they're aware of that.
Right.
When I talk to young people, they don't say I'm so aware of the fact that I've got like all this big train behind me.
When they're young, they're not. They're not
this big
train
train behind me coming, and this person also has a train, and we sort of have to figure out.
I've mentioned it many times. You're literally taking two entities, and in the business context, right? And you're bringing them together. It takes time to bring that together and jive well.
Let's couple that in with the idea of being frum as well, meaning like you don't have relationships with girls until you're 23, 24. Your only relationship with a girl is your parents or sister, really, in the real frum world, in the shidduch world, mostly, the majority of them is. So they're really starting off behind the 8 ball. How do people jive with that? Like how does that affect?
How do they transition?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that necessarily has to be something that prevents you from being successful, but I think it's something, again, it's an awareness piece, right? So the awareness that that not only am I talking to somebody, like I said before, that comes with their own world of experience, but also as a female, and I don't have a lot of experience talking to females, like you have to be aware of that as well, right? So it's just an added piece to that whole thing, and the reverse, right? So for women as well, right? For girls who are dating guys, aside from the fact that yes, they have their whole perspective and whatever they've gone through, they're also maybe learning the perspective of a 21, 22-year-old boy, 25-year-old boy, 28-year-old boy for the first time in their lives. So that's just, again, these are just these things that I think need to create greater awareness around both how do you recognize it, right? How do you recognize someone else's experience and everything that they're coming with? And then how do you learn to accept that and pull that into your own experience so you can actually figure out your compatibility?
Is the better route to be a proponent of this, to market this? Is it sending this message to the matchmakers, or is it sending it to the parents? Is it sending it to the children themselves? It'd be a great, perfect world if we can get all parties here. Yeah. But where do you see is the most prevalent that you can get to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about being realistic, right? So we were talking a little bit before that the show, sort of the way that I see it, right? And if you think of your life as a circle, right? So I'm a circle. I'm dating. I'm 25 years old, and I've got this circle, and in my circle is all my life experiences, right? And then I have this other person, right? And they're another circle, right? So if you think about it like a Venn diagram, right? So it's funny, but if you talk to young couples and say, so when you get married, right? 2 circles, right? So when they get married, what's the overlap? Like they'll think it's like 50%, 60%, and it's not, right? It's just not. It's maybe 10%. So I think we're overselling.
Wait, 10% really?
Yeah.
Even in like the most
Similar background.
Again, just think about how long have they known each other for,
Yeah, not long.
right?
Not long.
How many hours have they spent together before they get married?
We know here.
No, that's
Nothing.
what I'm saying.
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say 10% is probably realistic, right? And again,
that low. And
it's
even
okay.
At a high is 20%. Let's say.
But that's okay. But that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it only being 10%, right? As long as you're aware of that, right? But if you think it's 50 or 60%, you're going to be seriously disappointed at some point.
Okay, so I love that. Everyone listening right now, I want you to understand. Because this is where we like throw it to our listeners, our audience, our friend, our single siblinghood, as we refer to it here.
I don't refer to
people.
Just FYI.
If you meet the right one, you have no more than 10% in common. Okay, I want you to know that. Okay, now they know that.
Yeah. And so I'll give you an example of that, like a practical example of that. And sort of how I discovered it before I even like learned about it. And only later did I realize what had actually happened. So I was dating somebody and it was going really well, right? Easy conversation. We were getting along and it was going really nicely. So every date, when I would bring her back, I would drive her back to her house and we'd still end up sitting in the car for a few hours. So that was going great, right? And then I just realized that she was like hashkafically a little different than I was, right? She was just a little, let's call it frummer than I was, right? So I said, okay, we have to have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that she kept sort of bringing up, but we weren't like focused on it because we were having a nice time talking, she would talk about TV, right? She can't have a TV in her house. She can't have a TV in her house. I was like, she was like 20. I'm like, it's a big decision to make right now. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know myself. Like, maybe yeah, maybe no, but I'm not making a decision. Like, I'm not determining my life based on that. Yeah, so I remember I went out with her and I said, let's test this, right? Not this theory about compatibility, but let's just test this. Like, how far is she going to go with this TV thing? So I said, I like sports a lot, right? And let's say your husband came to you and said, hey, listen, I know you don't like TVs. Your family has a TV, by the way. So what if I want to go watch the Super Bowl? Like, let's face it, right? The number one sporting event of the year is Super. I want to go
practical example.
There you go. That's what I said, right?
I love that.
I want to go watch the Super Bowl.
And you were seeing how long, like at this point? How long?
We had gone on like 4 or 5 dates.
Okay, so it was in your circles. It was at that point where it should be brought up.
I felt like it should.
Okay, perfect.
Because that was everything else was going fine.
Okay, got it.
Right?
Just getting an idea.
Yeah. So I said, would you be okay with your husband, going to watch the Super Bowl, because it's a big event.
Avery, you listening?
Right.
And she said,
"Will not have a husband watching the Super Bowl."
huh?
Okay, fine, but your wife,
Yeah. So she said, would you be okay with your wife saying no?
Oof.
And I said, well,
she was smart, shrewd, very shrewd of her.
I said, well, that wouldn't be my wife.
Oh, I love it.
And I only realized later, and it was just like, probably a smart act, yeshiva guy thing to say at the time. I only realized later, though, what I was really saying was, you're not letting me into your world, right? You're not letting a preference of mine, right? Because that can't be my wife because I'm looking for somebody who can somewhat be flexible. And even though you can feel very, very strongly about something right now, to be so determined that this is never going to change. And I don't know where she is today. Maybe she has TVs in her house or not. I don't know. But I just remember that later on in life, as I was sort of formulating this theory, this story reminded me. And I said, that's what was happening there.
Right. Well, we hit that fine line and balance in relationships where, yes, you do want to change somebody. You want them to be able to change for you, but you don't want to change them. Like, you can't change anybody, really.
No, yeah, you don't want to change
anybody. You don't want to change them.
No.
You have to learn how to be accepting of someone else in a relationship.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what people think that. People think that even when you go for a counseling or something, they think it's how am I going to change this person?
Yeah.
And it's an eye opener when I tell them, like, no, it's not about changing them. It's about you learning to live with that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about you learning to live with this situation. It's not about me sort of convincing them to change. And it's actually, I'll tell you honestly, I think that when I able to get that perspective across to somebody, I think it's super helpful for them, right? So, it's just like, is that why we're here? I'm like, yeah, you thought, no, I dragged my husband or I dragged my wife here because I thought you were going to change them. I'm like, no, we're actually just going to learn to accept each other the way we are because maybe a little bit will change, right? But most of it's not because, like, again, they're coming with this whole worldview, world experience, everything they're coming with.
Right. Yeah. So how would you tell someone who, wants to change somebody to, learn to accept one of the flaws? Like, what would you do to, like, not only accept it, but to make them appreciate it even?
Because that's so
except-
common. That's so common.
Well, isn't that what
You hit it,
isn't
yeah.
that what it's supposed to happen?
No, I think Avery and I
Example,
agree,
a cigar, like a
these
smoker.
people-
You know, let's say
Always
somebody
with my
let's say somebody didn't want a smoker,
Right.
Or someone didn't want somebody who can't sing. I don't know,
Smoker,
something
vapor, yeah.
silly.
Well, that's a big, that's a big part.
Yeah, you got to have your
Girls
things.
really
You got to have
pull
your things that
back.
I can't. Like I can't live with that, right? But I think when you have something like, okay, that's like a rule that I just can't deal with, like a smoker or something. I think you have to stick with that. But I think if someone has, again, certain preferences that they have, right? Certain things that they enjoy. I don't think you have to be so compatible about that. Like, let's say, for example, I'll give you one. A husband likes to play sports, right? And after you get married, he's into sports, right? And he wants to continue playing, right? And most games are late at night, right? And they're 10 o'clock at night. And I used to do that. I remember going and playing, flag football at Aviator or ice hockey at Long Beach or whatever it was. Yeah. And that's when it is, right? Everyone works, everyone's got a life. So when is it? So yeah, I think a wife who says, no, I expect my husband to be home every night of the week at 10, 11 o'clock, at night, is not accepting the importance of that in her spouse's life, right? And vice versa, right? So a wife who has certain things, she likes to be part of, they still have like musical productions, and there are many women who like to be involved with that, right? And that means that, you're gonna have to change your schedule because your wife wants to go sing or dance in a thing, and that's important to her, right? Yeah. Even though I can't relate to it, like, you're 35 years old. Like, what are you still dancing and singing? Like, you're not getting a job on Broadway. Like, what are you still stuck on this? No, why? So I have to go back to whoever it is at night, whether it's a chavrusa or whether it's something I like to do at night, and say, listen, my wife has something that's important to her. I've not that I'm allowing her to do it. That's a terrible perspective. I've pulled that appreciation she has into my life, and it's something that's important to me now. Right? It is important for me that she's able to do these things because it's important for her. That's really changing your perspective on it. It's not allowing someone to do something. That's a terrible sort of way to think about it. And sometimes people think that's what it is.
That's what you took the words, you took the thoughts out of my mind.
No, I was reading your mind.
You were. And is there a way that someone can work on that? Should they bitch to their rabbi? Should they complain to their parents? And then when they look at their wife, oh, I'm so happy you went on that, 2-week trip with your friends, and I was home with two kids. Or even, let's say you were shidduch dating, and I'm so happy you went with your friends to Mexico, and even though you were lonely, what do you do if you're having a little bit of a challenge with it, but I have to do this. I have to do this.
You got to work on it, right? That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's not something where you want to complain because like I still disagree with it, and then like I'm going to complain to my friends and everything like that, but I'm still not let my wife go, because then you're still in that category of letting you do something, right? Yeah. It's not that. I'm pulling your perspective. We all see this, right? It's the same thing like when couples get married and they start having like yom and tovim together, and they have different minhagim or different customs around certain things, right? Yeah. So it's not about I let you. You guys want to like dance around the table on Pesach, and my family never did it. It's not like I'm letting you do it, right? I'm appreciating it, right? I'm loving it, right? I think it's great, right? I'll tell you one.
I hope you find someone like that. She makes you dance on the table.
I'll give you like a world kind of example of that, not from dating, right? So when I was at Columbia University, I took a course on mediation and conflict resolution, and they had a number of people from the UN actually came to take this course. So this guy comes over to me, right? Clearly Orthodox Jew, and at Columbia you're a target, right? It's a very liberal school. At Columbia you're a target. I'm in my yarmulke there. I was married with probably a couple of kids. I was probably in my mid-20s at the time. He comes over and he says, and he was African American, and I think he came with this sort of assumption that I couldn't have a worldview because I came from such a close world. He comes right over to me, sees me in this course, and he comes right over to me and goes, I'm successful at resolving conflicts and things like that because I see everyone as green. He's like, I see everyone as green. So everyone's equal to me, and I see everyone as equal, and I think that's great, right? He said, and then he looked at me like, what's my response going to be? So the response should have been, that's great, pat him on the back, walk away. But I was yeshiva guy with a little bit of attitude. So I said, I don't have that worldview at all. And he said, you don't? And, I said, no, not at all. And he said, why? I said, because I don't see everyone as green. And he said, how could you not see everyone as green? That's not fair. I said, no, what's not fair is seeing everyone as green. I said, because let's say you're teaching a math class, right? And Sally's just great at math. She doesn't need any help, right? And Phil in the back, he needs a lot of help. So should everyone get 2 minutes of the teacher's attention? Or should Sally get 0 time because she doesn't need any help, and Phil's going to get 4 minutes because he's going to pick up Sally's 2 minutes? I said, that's my perspective, right? I need to find out about you. I need to learn about you, right? And once I've learned about you, now I know how I can deal with you, right? I can't treat everyone the same way. And I think, again, now taking this back to marriages, it's the same thing, right? It's not just like, read a book and just relate that or translate that, whatever it is. It's really about trying to appreciate, understand where someone's coming from, why something's important to them, And
love that.
and sometimes you just have to let it go.
Keeping everyone green, that's like marriage and even dating as well. You
Yeah.
can relate to dating because
Yeah.
people, you can close off yourself from so many people within dating
Yeah.
because of their background. I've seen it so many times. Black hat.
Yeah,
Doesn't wear a black hat. Didn't go to that yeshiva.
it's equivalent.
She didn't go to seminary.
It's equivalent of dating
It's
off the resume, right?
Yeah.
It's equivalent of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, the resume is like really matched nicely, so that should make it great, and it's not, right? Because the important question is, yes, I see their resume, but what's their ability to be able to pull it and appreciate someone else, right, from a different world? And some of the best marriages I see, right, some of the greatest marriages you see, and they talk about like opposites attract, right? It's not that, right? Opposite. It's really this, like, there's such a beautiful thing in a relationship when people come from two seemingly completely incompatible worlds and they're getting along great because you realize they both have this magic, right? They both have this ability to make space for someone else to come into their world. And you're like, that's amazing. Wow, you're Hasidish and you're Sephardi, and somehow the two of you get along great and everything. And like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's, and that's, like I said, that's almost sometimes more beautiful than just like two people, like, yeah, they worked on paper and, and that's it, So I think that's much more important than I said.
We just work well on paper. That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
It's the same thing when I interview people for work, right? I'm kind of the same way. It's like, yes, on paper, everyone looks great, right? Every resume looks great. Everyone puts their best foot forward. But, what I spend most of my time in an interview is not your skill set, right? Or your background, your education. Like that's easy to test, right? It's much more like, are we going to get along, right? Can we work well together?
And this is what I have such an appreciation for, relating shidduchim to the corporate structure. And when you're a vice president of a company you have maybe 50 to 100 people under you, okay? When you're interviewing somebody, you don't just think, can I work well with this person? That's the last thing on a VP's mind, on a director, whatever the title is. Mm-hmm. They're thinking, can this, is this person, do we like them? Would he flow well with the team? Because I've been working with that team recently. And, okay, I'm going to just test, I'm testing for 3 or 4 out of 10 that I'd like. And I pass them off right away to, the manager he'll be reporting to.
Right.
And I think in shidduchim, shadchanim forget this. Mm-hmm. They forget it. They don't know it, and they're incapable of it. You're incapable. And they need to understand that it's not their job to just, oh, okay, what are you looking for? Are you sure you need that? Shah.
Right.
Relatively speaking, is this someone would this guy work well with your...
Right.
Well, to be fair, I think they're representing the parents. Shadchanim represent what the parents generally want.
Right.
So the general consensus would be, in that case, right, there's this general, narrow-minded viewpoint that's out there that Shadchanim are representing.
Oh, that we know.
Right.
That we know. It's very narrow-minded, yes.
No, and I think that should be like the most important question. Like, I don't really get involved with, in shidduchim a lot, but I'm trying now, and my wife is actually really great at it, and she's super involved in our shul and all the initiatives there. And I tried one recently, and the whole time I was just thinking one thing the whole time. I was like, I have one goal in this, and everyone would think, that they should get married. I'm like, no, that they should both come back and say they had a really great time, right? Exactly. That's it, right?
There you go.
He got it. And this guy's kids are going to get married, folks.
Thanks for the applause. And I didn't realize that a live studio audience is.
Yeah, we did.
And
Paid them to come in. But,
they came in from Ellen DeGeneres.
And the way that I thought about it, like how am I going to know that, right? Was I just thought about like, are both of these people that kind of person, right? That's going to allow someone else into their world, and right, that's what it is, right? Because I remember I went on a date. My first date ever. This probably should have ended my dating career. I went on a date, and this was like,
Tell us more.
Yeah, I wasn't quite ready to start dating yet, and someone was really pushing me, like, gotta go out with this girl, gotta go out with this girl. And they knew me pretty well, and I said, okay, if they're telling me I should, then I probably should. An hour and a half into the date, the girl's like, yeah, take me home.
Oh, nice.
And
what were the reasons there?
I don't know, but I think that's what it was. I think both of us, probably where I was in my life and where she was.
Probably just thinking about
just
the date.
Whatever I said, I probably said something, or she may have said whatever it was. It was just this like we weren't quite ready for that. What I'm talking about, like this whole letting someone into someone's perspective. I may have had a perspective on something, or she may have a perspective on something, and the other one just didn't respond the right way, right? And that's it. So in that mindset, it's like, well, we clearly don't have the same perspective. Therefore, this is it. We can't go further than this.
Or there was some triggers there.
It could be. But again, I don't think.
I'm not blaming anyone.
No.
But they're triggers. They'll just come up.
I'm not either. But I just again, I think that's what happens, right? I think if you're And that's what I'm careful about, right? So again, when I'm trying to set somebody up now, when I think about, who I want to try to set up, I'm sure I'd love to work with everybody. I think I can work with people who have that sort of open mindset, right? And that I'm prepared to hear someone else's perspective. I'm prepared to hear about someone else's life and someone else's, experiences and their family and everything like that. And therefore, even if they say something that I completely disagree with, right, I'm still gonna be able to have a good date with them because we can just have a pleasant conversation about that, right? So my family likes to do X, or whatever X is, right? And the other person says, your gut reaction is like that's bonkers, right? Rather than saying, yeah, just, can you explain that, right? Can you tell me about that, right? Why is that such an important thing for your family, right? Why is that so important for where you come from, whatever it is, and just have a pleasant conversation. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to marry the person, whatever it is, but just have and I think that's where we need to do some work in terms of training, people who are dating, right? To just have pleasant conversations.
Avi, I'll tell you, like for me personally, like every time I've had the best dating situations, the best dates have been exactly that. Like when I've been in my head, like if I overthink things too much, it's like, oh, you're overthinking it, or it's just not going to be a good date. It's been terrible. It's been awful. I've just been, had bad dates because of that. When you're in a mindset, even if the girl is not the right girl, even if you know it within the first 5 minutes, just having the mentality of getting to know somebody, practicing that on someone that you even know is not going to be the right person is probably the best way to learn how to actually have a good date. So those have been the best times I've been dating. Yeah. And 100%. It definitely clarifies things.
100%.
Much easier.
And that's like I said, and that's what you hear from couples, like when they'll come back and they'll say afterwards, like that went well, not for me, right? But that went well. Right. And sometimes, often they'll have an idea, like, because of the great experience that I had, I actually think of somebody else for them. Like often that's what that experience will tell you they had a good experience because they're thinking about somebody else because they've been able to do that, as opposed to it's just not, not that one, right? And you're like, that doesn't. I don't learn anything from that. So I do think that's a big part. And again, I think I remember early on when we were trying to write these premarital programs, I wrote one with a bunch of local therapists here. It was a big focus on that, right? And weird things that people would never even think about having conversations about. Like, for example, have a conversation about finances, right? No one tells couples like. And they don't really know anything about finances, but just like, how do finances work? Like who pays the bills? Like in your family, just those can generate such interesting conversations, right?
Anxiety also.
That could generate. Does the wife plan to work? These are things that come up that people don't talk about even till after marriage. Like, do you plan to work? Do you not plan to work? Do you want to raise your kids? Because they see their wife, they see the mothers, and they don't really have that template. But they may want to do something else, and the expectations could be different.
I think the bills, though, are a lot more relatable because I think with our generation, overwhelmingly, these girls know, most of them know they have to work.
But again,
paying those bills, those weird conversations. But what are some giveaways you can tell us how to work that out?
No, but I'm saying even if you want to talk about the one about work, right? So that's the one you can even go with because you can say something along the lines of, "Oh, I hear you don't want to work, and that's great. Are you open to moving?
Is there hope?
Wait, are you open to moving to an out-of-town community?" Right. Oh, okay. That's where you can start.
Am I? Okay. No, are you, Avery?
Right. That's the first. But then that's again. But when you bring this up to couples and you say have these conversations, right? So like you're saying, right now on paper, if you ask the question, do you want to work, and the girl says no, so the guy says, well, X or check, whatever it is, right? That because that's a paper conversation, right? That's just a checkbox conversation. It's not really leading to, again, that deeper conversation where a girl might say, my preference would be to be able to stay home with my children, right? My preference to be able to do that. And then you have to have a conversation. Okay, how are we going to make that work? Right? And then have that conversation. Like, I don't think a couple has ever had a conversation, or I would say in our community, most couples are not having that conversation about, if in the event, and I'll tell you honestly, I mean, I know from my own experience, right? So my wife works, right? But there were certainly times when after, some of our children, and I know this, this is the case for a lot of people where she's, I can't go back to work right now, right? Whatever it is. So it's never a given, right? I mean, I have employees. I've employees who have had children. It's the same thing, right? And they always say, "Yeah, I'm coming right back after I have my baby." I'm like, "No, I don't. We don't know that, right? You can come back, but we don't know that, right? We don't know how that's going to be. You may need more time or less time, whatever it is." So again, those are the conversations that I think we need to. And this was the other program I was writing with a number of therapists in Brooklyn, right? We were actually writing a program to start having these conversations with boys and girls in high school. Right.
I like that. Yeah. I'm going to send my kids to which I don't know.
No, I'm just saying. We wanted to go to high schools and say, like, you need to start teaching these boys when they're 11th and 12th grade how to have these meaningful conversations, right? How to have a conversation about understanding other people's perspectives because they're so like where they're coming from, boys and girls, right? Where they're coming from right now, everything went so in lockstep. The schools they go to, the camps they go to, where they're going in Israel, all those things are so in lockstep. They're not really meeting any of those people who are going to have those sort of like opposite views, opposite, hashkaf or whatever it is. So you need to start thinking about them, bringing up them now. How will you deal with somebody who has a slightly different hashkafa or slightly different perspectives or slightly different goals than you do? And start that in 11th, 12th grade. And then hopefully, they're able to do it later in life.
I think, by the way, I'm coming from the Altaheim, and Avery also. That it's like it's not so young.
Yeah,
it's so young. Can that happen?
The modern community.
25 is tough to give over these concepts to the younger kids.
You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed.
I don't have any kids, so I wouldn't know.
No.
All right, Avi and Avery. We're actually going to go to a quick break. Take a look at this, by the way. It's up on the webpage. It's the Shidduch Crisis is No Laughing Matter with Mendy Pellin. It's pretty funny. He pretends to be like a news reporter, and he's reporting a story on Shidduchim. Take a look at that. It's up on the webpage at shidduchpodcast.com under articles. That's shidduchpodcast.com under articles. Again, Mendy Pellin making another funny over the Shidduch game and everything like that. So shidduchpodcast.com under articles.
Are you a newlywed couple or a parent of a newlywed couple? Well, you may have just found your shidduch, but there's another shidduch that our friend Broker Ben can make for you, and that's for your new home. Broker Ben sells houses, rents apartments throughout the tri-state area. He specializes in the 5 towns and Crown Heights. If you need a place to stay for short-term, long-term, to live, and create a house that can build future shidduchim, reach out to Broker Ben at 516-491-9593, or you can find him on Instagram at TheBrokerBen on Instagram.
I'm just saying, you'd be amazed at how early you can start to train children on. You can start in elementary school. You can start at a really young age. Again, it's all relative to that point. But you can teach kids at a very young age. Give you an example. My kids go to Darcha, and I'm not here, touting one school over another. My kids got into lots of schools in the community, but one of the things that Darcha is very well known for is bringing in children who have certain disabilities, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, one of the amazing things, and I think Rabbi Bender talks about it a lot, one of the amazing things is being able to have kids experience that, right? Have kids be open to that and see that, right? And that's an amazing thing, right? I had there was a even this Shabbos there was an Arshul. I don't know, were you there? This Shabbos?
Yeah, a little bit.
So there was somebody who brought a kid that he takes care of. And he's a disabled kid, and this counselor brought him for Shabbos, right? And like, that's amazing, right? That's just it's an amazing thing, because you realize that although he comes from a world and a family where he doesn't necessarily have to deal with that, he's comfortable dealing with that, right? So I think you can, at a very young age, everything in perspective, you can do it with 5.
I hear that. No, you know what? I like this. I really like this analogy, because I have known a difference with my parents' generation. Maybe yours. I don't know if we're in the same. I'm
43.
Are you Gen? Oh, so you're the first millennium,
Very
basically.
old.
You're a first. Okay.
Yeah.
So I see with our parents' generation that it's a really different response that's very unwarranted, but we handle that better. That we say, wow, like this is a special neshama. We have a different. So I hear that. So maybe this can work by teaching the children these steps of your program and how to have those conversations. I think it could work, actually. Okay, right away. You just changed my mind. I was like, no way, and you're right.
Well, that was the point again. So that was the point of when the first program I wrote was premarital, right? That was like for couples who were either like engaged already or about to get engaged, and that's what we thought. And then we realized, wait a second, right? In Brooklyn, we were writing this program for weeks and weeks, and I spent a lot of time there. And that was for even earlier on, right? That was for bringing it into high schools. And unfortunately, at that time, both these programs never saw the light of day. Right. So both programs, the community wasn't ready at the time. And again, this is 15 years ago. I'm hoping now. I mean, I'd love to try again. And one of my goals is really to try this again. It hasn't changed, right? I think the goal.
We'll promote it for sure.
We're gonna promote it.
The goal hasn't. No, the goal hasn't changed. But I think there's an even greater need now, because when I see what's going on right now and talk to people, and I still talk to many of the couples counselors, and you see people who are getting engaged, and then, a lot of those engagements are getting broken off, or even like worse, getting married and very quickly it's not working out.
Yeah.
And so often, although I don't know the specific details, right? So often, it relates back to this notion, right? It relates back to this notion of not so much red flags. I think that's an important one, right? But more along the lines of, did we have these sort of critical, important conversations, at the right times while we were dating, at the right times while we were engaged? Do we have them? And if we didn't, and we're having them now, that could be kind of why it's not working.
I love that. Let me ask you. You mentioned that some common themes that would like lead to people like into this program that you were constructing. What are some of those that people maybe can try to become aware of? And does everyone need it? Does everyone need it also?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone needs it, right? I mean, it's so rare.
Oh, it depends, right, where you would get it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, everyone. I don't think you would tell anyone, anything. I'm not telling you anything today where you're not like, oh yeah, this is revolutionary. Like I didn't know that people needed to hop on one foot, for 4 miles, and then they're gonna be ready to get married, right? It's just that perspective, right? It reminds me. I was once giving a lecture on John Gottman, who's a brilliant
marriage therapist.
Brilliant marriage therapist, and he was one of the first people to actually study marriages. He had this little apartment at I think it was like Washington University or something like that, and he had cameras all over, and this is like in the 70s and 80s, and he would observe these couples over a weekend, and he would see how they related to each other. And one of the books he wrote, he said, successful couples will have 5 positive things that they say for every 1 negative thing. Right. So I get up at this lecture and I'm talking about, great marriages and things like that. And this guy gets up and he says, yeah, that's a given. Like, what's so brilliant about that? If you say 5 positive things and 1 negative thing, you're gonna have a great marriage. Like,
right,
yeah.
Right.
I said, no. I said, what he's saying is you can learn that. He's not saying that, oh, well, I guess if you're not doing that, you're doomed, right? Like if you can't find 5 positive, every negative, like then you might as well just call it quits. What he's saying is that's your goal, right? Get to that point. And if you can get to that point, so I think the goal is, back to your question, I think we need to sort of teach those ideas to kids. Like, you still have a lot to learn. Right. So just this mindset.
Understand
also,
that. Yeah.
This mindset. You're starting to date now. Great. Right. Like I almost think like boys and girls, again, it's not going to happen, but should have a certificate that says they're ready. Right. And what does that mean? It means they've gone through certain courses. And what were the courses about? Yeah. The courses were about challenges and how do we deal with them and different perspectives and different backgrounds. That's the whole course.
And for our older singles too, for those who are reborn.
Yeah.
Because we have people coming to the show 25, 26, 30, and they're reborn.
100%.
Right.
So when you're reborn also.
Well, when we discuss these marriages in the community that are actually frayed and shattered and all that, when we think about it, a lot of these people have gotten married at 19 and 20, and they were pushed by their rabeim and their, yeshivas and seminaries to get the, quickest marriage done and whatever. And that's, like we said before, the hospital, like that's, it's going to rescue you, it's going to save you. And, waiting some time to get married and to become a person or to really learn certain things,
right?
May be a better option. I understand the Gemara's point. So that's sort of, the Gemara says get married at 18, right? So we have to, as from Jews, we have to balance that mentality, and it becomes this sort of cliffhanger. Yeah. I mean, 18-year-olds today, think about it. Life expectancy back in the day used to be what?
Don't they say 13?
50? So 18 then is a third of your life.
Yeah, but
today it's only like what, a quarter.
But again, I think
not 3/4.
I think you're bringing up a good point, but I think it's what did you do until you turned 18? Right. So again, 18-year-olds can get married, but what were they? Again, from a maturity standpoint, right? And sometimes it's 25, and sometimes it's 30. I don't think there's a specific time. And even and the same thing you were saying before, which I think was a great example, right? I don't think just because now you're married, you have to stop, right? There are certainly going to be things along the way, right, that you're going to get stuck with. And yes, I can say I'm open-minded, and my wife's open-minded, and whatever it is. There's always going to be those things, right? Same way with like kids, right? So you eventually have kids, and all your kids are different, right? And maybe some of them you know how to deal with, and maybe some of them you don't. Well, then you have to go learn, right? Don't assume because like, okay, well, our first kid was like, okay. No, you've got to go find out. You've got to, and it's a constant learning process.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes, people always wonder, like, does counseling actually help, or does it work? And I said again, it does. Yeah,
it works.
It works if people are open to it, right? Like I remember one time I was seeing a couple, and they were just like, he doesn't care about me, and she doesn't care about me. They're back and forth, doesn't care. And I was like, I don't think that's really true. Right. I was just thinking that, like, it didn't sound like it, but it was what they were stuck on. Right. They were stuck on who cares. Right. And so I said, let's try this little activity. Okay. I said, you're going to go home, right? And what I want you to do is I want you to each do 3 things for the other person. Don't tell them you're doing it, but do 3 specific things for the other person you don't normally do. Right? Just do those 3 things. So, and come back and we'll come back next week. Fine. So they said, okay, that's your homework. I was big on homework when I was doing couples counseling, a lot of homework.
Yeah.
So they came back the next week and I said to the husband, okay, so what were the 3 things that your wife did? And he said, I know exactly what they were. And he said 3 things. And she said, no, it was none of those. Right? He's like, no. She said, no. So he tried a couple other ones. It wasn't one of those. And finally she said what it was. And he's like, oh yeah. Right. So it was really like 15.
Oh, wow.
Right. And the same thing, right? She tried guessing his and it was also like the same thing. And I just said, that's it. Right. Again, I'm not saving your marriage. There's still a lot of work to do and everything like that. But again, there's just certain things that you need to learn somewhere along the way. And it's fine to come in and sort of get someone to give you a little perspective and open your eyes. And that was like an eye opener already there. Like, wait a second. So we can't go back to this whole notion like we don't care about each other because clearly you each do things for each other throughout the entire week, at least 10 or 15 things that actually work. But again, sometimes people just need to be reminded of that.
I have noticed, I think Avery can agree with me. You let me know. Some people, I feel like girls are a little bit more content or complacent with like going to couples therapy or trying it out. Is that something you see also? Is it maybe just more prevalent in the Jewish community, or is there a way to overcome it if your partner is really holding back? You're seeing someone seriously, you think you got to go, and usually I'll know. I think you'll know. People, one party will know. Yeah,
you got to normalize it, right? So that was one of the things that when I was doing like premarital counseling, people would say like, people go to premarital counseling with their problems. I'm like, no, everyone should go, right? Normalize. I think it's an important thing in general. I don't want to get into the whole sidetrack conversation, but just normalizing going for help, right? So yeah, maybe guys are less normalized for going for help, and maybe girls are more normalized for going for help. I don't know. Right? Maybe that's true.
That's probably the stereotype.
It could be, right?
I think it's the corporate structure, by the way.
It could be. But again, I think that's what we have to work on, right? So normalize not just in high. Again, those are certain things you can sort of teach really, really early on, also, right? When kids are young, right? Normalize going for help. Normalize talking about being stressed or struggling with relationships or things like that. And you normalize that. Then later in life, when they're dating or even when they're after dating or different things are coming up in their lives, and you've already normalized it. There's no stigma around, I talk to my friends all the time. I talk to people all the time about the fact that there are different times in my life where I've gone for somebody, taking my kids or myself or whatever is for help. And I don't say it because I need someone to know about my business. I say it because I'm trying to normalize it. Right. And I think that's the big thing. So back to your question about, is it guys or girls or whatever it is? I think it's everyone. I think everyone still struggles with this notion, and to assume that, you'll like you're saying before, people who still live in, they're 50, but now people living to their 80s and 90s, right? Yeah. And to assume that people are going to go 50, 60 years of their lives because somehow magically, they were able to date and get married and everything like that. Nothing's going to come up. No issue is going to come up. It's just silly, right? There are things going to come up. The stressors are going to come up in life, and we have to normalize, getting that help when you need it.
Normalize it. I like that. And I would just say, if you're having that struggle, maybe it's good to try to bump into someone. If you're seeing someone seriously, you think you got to go see like a professional. Maybe meet in an informal setting, like by a simcha, and be like, oh, that person was so cool. Shimmy, where do you, how do you know him? Oh, she's a therapist. Oh, no, like maybe that's how you can, get that up and going. So.
I wish people even came into the whole notion of dating with this idea that if a date didn't go well or something didn't go well, it didn't necessarily mean that they couldn't date the person anymore, but maybe it was an opportunity to either themselves or as a couple go and have a conversation, right? Is this a sticking point? And sometimes I hear that from people, and they'll say like, oh yeah, I was dating somebody and I stopped because, this issue came up. And in my head, I'm like, that may have been one that you could have overcome, right? That may have been one that you could overcome. And again, not necessarily, right? But it could be, right? And again, I think we're probably still at the point as a community where if a guy or girl came back from a date and said, yeah, we had this sort of issue, we had this challenge where we weren't compatible in this area, right? And then that would be like, okay, that's the end, versus thinking, okay, maybe there's a rabbi in the community, or maybe there's somebody you guys can talk to and see if you guys can work that out. And I think that's a perspective I think we need to have.
Yeah, Avi, that's a great, insightful point of view. I really like it. And this conversation was great. And
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get to our closing after these short
Thank you,
messages.
Avery. Thank you for having me too.
Yeah, short closing after these short messages. Quick closing. Want to start it off?
No, you.
Want to do it?
Oh, yeah, no, I can. You want me to do it?
I don't care.
No, you do it, and then you pass off me. I have 2 lines I want to say, and then I'll say
All right.
that.
Okay, so episode 56, how to
In the books.
become the person someone else wants to marry, joined by Avi Singer. IJ and I were joined by Avi Singer. We had a great, enlightening conversation about many things that have certainly taught me how to become someone that maybe someone will want to marry me, maybe not. You never know. But there's always that option. You never know. Have to keep it in mind. But yeah, so thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to just...
Where can people find
yeah.
you? How do you
My
want
show?
the public to find
Yeah,
you?
sure.
Okay, your show.
No
Like I said, I'm hoping, again, I've grown a lot over the last years. I'm hoping to start doing this again.
Okay.
Right. So I backed out. It's so funny. 10, 15 years later, I still have couples in the community who will call me and say, "You still in couples count?" I'm like, "No, I don't do it anymore." Like, you need to start doing it again.
Oh, wow.
So I'd love to. I mean, I'm hoping I'm at the point right now in my life where I can start doing it again. But more importantly than the counseling part, I think the program part. So yeah, I'm around. People can always find me. I'm local in the 5 towns, and people can find me here. And I'm certainly happy to have these discussions. But
So they'll Google you. They'll Google you, or they'll contact you.
I'm
contact
not so Googleable.
Okay, so contact Avery if anyone's
They'll
interested.
come to Davin in the back and have some
just come to the
candy,
shul.
some
Okay,
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah.
I think I've listened to a number of the episodes. I think you guys.
Oh,
are-
yeah?
yes.
Which one's your favorite?
I don't know if I have a favorite.
Don't.
But
Don't answer.
Who's your favorite character? Which one?
Oh,
Avery or
please,
IJ?
stop.
But again, I think like even like the title is right. No one talks shidduchim anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Like, not to talk about shidduchim. It's like to
I
talk
love
the
it. You get it.
concept,
You
right?
get
It's
it.
like we
Exactly.
need to rethink the whole structure and how this works and everything about that. And yeah, so I think you guys are doing a great job.
I love that. And I will say, Avi, thank you for coming on. 2 takeaways that I thought were, so powerful and very insightful. I like that you said what you said, opposites attract, but I see singles today are successful are the ones that welcome the compromise. That was one big one, which I have not heard before, and I think it's very insightful. And also, like this one, it's always good to be reminded, it's not about changing them. It's about living with whatever they have. And it shouldn't be a flaw. It shouldn't be this. Just a difference. Have to learn how to live with that. That's my closing, Avery.
Okay, yeah. Agreed. Definitely. I was thinking about the circle for a long time. The circle of life.
Avery,
Close it off
by
on
the way,
that.
as Avi said,
Live in the circle.
he wants us to do homework. So I expect 5 nice things. I want to hear from you. All right, and after that, I'll think about I'll give 5 bad things and 1 nice.
Hit the
thing back.
record button, close it, then I'll say all the nice things.
Oh, you said. All right, as we usually end off, this is the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. Happy face, smiley face, silly face.
All right, thanks so much. That was great.
The women love it. Avi, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
for
thanks so
coming.
much for having me.
That was great.
Fantastic. If you guys have anything else down the road that you want to...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just one topic. And
That is
the
one
other thing is I
topic.
want to talk to you guys before I leave about the podcast that I want.
Hey guys, this is Yona from the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. I want to take a moment to tell you about I Like Ike Marketing. I Like Ike Marketing serves all marketing and communication needs, including web design, branding, graphics, Facebook and Instagram ad campaigns, logos, social media, and more. To get the full deets and explore their services, go to likeike.net or call 516-399-1000.
Ouchie's Media Network.